This real-side experience would open up in a very advanced sci-fi looking laboratory. I would be in the presence of a group of individuals. My real awareness afforded impressions revealed them to be those on their own respective processes of awareness, though my personal self was unfamiliar as to their identities. Seemed we were to investigate this laboratory and the purpose that it served. For indeed, further impressions would illuminate the personal self, as to this being rather a dark force operation. The laboratory was one designed for the creation of hybrids, the mishmashing of various genetics to bring forth body forms as a combination of various species. The hybrid program is one that is in operation on the Earth, but extends far beyond it, as the reptilians are notorious for creating various combinations to fulfill a variety of roles and functions for their assorted, ill-intended agendas. So the fact that this is taking place is nothing new. However, in this particular laboratory, would a hybrid be created that had such a unique design that the body form culminated was one of considerable capability, designed to be able to maximize carnage and destruction on whatever planet it was deployed. The group and I, as I said, were to be shown this seemingly. The hybrid was contained initially as we entered the lab, though little could be made of its physical appearance. The surface of the large stasis-like pod that held it was somewhat opaque, which denied ease of determining of the creature's body form. But then, one of the dark force scientists would enter the lab, and as it transpired then, we were not simply observing the situation from the real awareness position, aside from creation, as can sometimes be the case, where we cannot impact the situation, we simply observe, nor can the simulation or the other simulated body form participants likewise have any bearing on us, for here we were in fact operating within the simulated experience, our awareness operating through inserted body forms, and so we would be very apparent to the scientist, who was less than pleased as to our being here. My further impressions were that this was somewhat of a secret dark force operation, the creation of this super hybrid of unparalleled destructive capability. However, in reality, as it is this one overall isness everything reality, that all real awareness, that which we each actually are, is a part of, that animates through all the consciousness, that effects into all body forms and simulation, so no idea is beyond the view of the real awareness, as despite how the personal created selves may consider themselves separate and differentiated from everything else, all personal selves and their creations are in actuality animated by this one isness everything reality, as I said, and so any personal self can be shown anything simulated as effected from the idea creations of any consciousness by the real awareness that is through it all. The real awareness has a full access, so to speak. As I said, was rather disgruntled by our presence, and his means of attempting to deal with us, to eliminate what were effectively witnesses to this operation, was to unleash the hybrid. He pulled a series of levers in rapid succession. The stasis pod, which was keeping the creature in suspended animation, would send as though an electric charge through the liquid medium the creature was floating within. This jolted it to full conscious awakening. The pod would open also, and spill its monstrous contents onto the ground. The scientist scuttled from the room, cackling maniacally, seemingly content with his conviction that the hybrid would dispatch the group and myself, to ensure there were no witnesses to this dark force skullduggery. The creature itself was rather difficult to describe, to the extent that its appearance was almost offensive to the eye, as though it didn't make sense based on any comparable reference. I'm uncertain what genetic species combinations could have given rise to such a creature. The best I can describe it as was a gigantic mass of writhing nonsensicalness. And indeed, would it proceed to somewhat engulf a few of my group, in a curious way and method that was as hard to explain as the beast's body form. As I said, this creature was designed to be deployed on planets, and once there would automatically go about a carnage of absorption, effectively eliminating all body forms it would find, impressions suggesting it was virtually indestructible, and quite clearly it was intended by the dark forces to create more, for whatever targets the dark forces had in mind for them. And my impressions were that as it absorbed, so it would grow, for indeed already its size had multiplied several times with the absorption of the group members. Its growth would have no bounds or limits either, and I had the view of it potentially able to cover an entire planet with its mass, to the extent that nothing living could evade it. The group members that remained and myself retreated from the lab, and found ourselves now relocated in a kind of wooden cabin as the previous scene faded, elevated high from the ground, and we were joined by a far larger group in addition to our own, and there we were all discussing this new dark force menace, the hybrid that was practically unstoppable. Seems that all who were present either had witnessed the hybrid first-hand, as my group and I had, or had learned of it. Either way, this was something that was not to have been seen, and we all were marked by the dark forces for destruction consequently. And now, the dark forces having determined where we were positioned, lay siege to our refuge. Dark force assassins, armed with sophisticated laser weaponry. They lay waste to our cabin, but were unable to slay any one of us. And as I often have shared, as everything simulated is based on the installation of ideas, so must the idea be present in a consciousness for it to be effected into our experience. For an assassin to be able to kill me, so I must agree that he can. The idea is a consciousness installed, and that now will be my experience. Absent of this agreement, despite an assassin's best efforts, he will be unsuccessful in dispatching me. And so, in all real side experiences, and indeed the physical, our vulnerability to others is dependent on agreements that render us so, and those that evade the dark forces' elimination efforts, or those that fall foul to them, including at the hands or tentacles of monsters, such as the hybrid beast, depends on the nature of agreements in the consciousness in relation to those that attempt us harm. The scene would skip to where we were retreating across a beach-like setting, heading into a large darkened woodland, and there we would lose our dark force assassins. However, we would encounter still more resistance, taking the form of a variety of animals. My impressions were that these were not simply animal body types that were directly real awareness animated prior to the creating of the secondary free will utilizing a personal self, but more so beings with the secondary self established, just in the forms of animals. On the real side, individuals can appear as they are now, according to their choices and life decisions and consciousness, but forms that they may not be currently as yet assuming on the physical. Individuals, through their poor life choices, may become as reptilian, for example, will in fact be seen as reptilian now on the real side, where everything is instantly its effects, but effects that take the moments they do to process through on the physical, and on the physical currently they may indeed still be human. These animals were indeed dark force associated minions, snakes, crocodiles, etc., and it can be so that were one to continue along abrasive, unsupporting of life lines of choice, it can be that the assumption of animal, beast-like forms becomes so in future so-called lifetimes, but forms that on the real side they will be as now. Their body forms a reflection of their abrasively ill-intended designed consciousnesses, and they would attempt what the previous assassins failed to do, eradicate us, though by more rudimentary means, teeth and claw, etc. But as I said, simulated outcomes in situations of a confrontation and altercation is based on agreement, and should agreements be lacking that allow success of attack, this will express in various simulated ways of our putting down our assailants, and indeed, on this occasion, so the larger group and myself would alter our exterior forms and take on the appearance of various animal types also, though, unlike our attackers, two-legged, bipedal, and these alternative animal-like bodies were as though made of a gleaming golden metal, which made us somewhat invulnerable to the dark force beasts, whose teeth and claws bore little impact. Some of us were as golden metallic hawks and other bird-like beings, others more feline. I failed to recall the animal type that I adopted, as I was operating in first-person perspective, so not really able to scrutinize my form. But we were able to walk through the melee of attacking beasts, sweeping them aside with effortless ease. Their attacks would abate, and now we were confronted with what was a kind of robotic man, though fixed to the ground, and for some reason this robot was essential to the perpetuation of the hybrid from earlier, and indeed all the hybrids of that type, as though linked with them in some curious, indefinable way that my personal self couldn't quite grasp. And so it was that the group and I, in our altered forms, would surround the robot being and blast it with energy that had it destroyed. I had the sense this wasn't a robot body form as animated by awareness. It just seemed to be the form chosen for that which in some way was maintaining the existence of the hybrids. We had located it, destroyed it, and this served to render the dangerous hybrids immobile in some way, as though deactivating them, suggesting they were perhaps semi-robotic or cyborg-like themselves, bringing this dark force operation to an end. Interestingly, this destruction of the robotic-looking object also liberated a larger group of alien-like beings. It was all rather hard to recognize as to what was going on precisely, but it's as though these aliens, which looked very much like Greys, though not those that were Dark Force affiliated, had been forced to participate in this hybrid program, to bring their expertise and genetic skills to bear, but on their success, so were they betrayed and somehow trapped via this robotic being, as though displaced and locked into a kind of a pocket dimension that was maintained through this robot, just as the hybrids were. And once this robot was destroyed, so not only were the hybrid monsters deactivated, but these alien, grey-like beings liberated also, and they were indeed most grateful for their freedom, and would fade from the scene. Overall, then, a curious experience, the creation of a dangerous set of hybrids, capable of eradicating all life on any planet that they are deployed onto, but an operation that was seemingly shut down by the group and myself, with the liberation of a group of aliens who had been manipulated, coerced, or forced in some way to participate.
It's good, Kevin. Future generations, I could see you writing book or audio tape. Rescue missions, one would be another would be like ways the Earth was destroyed. I mean, you have all these experiences. So cool, Kevin. Thanks for sharing that.